Throughout Harry's long, epic saga, there have been multiple occasions which nearly got him expelled from his favorite place on Earth, Hogwarts. Everything from blowing up Aunt Marge to saving Dudley from Dementors, Harry has done it all. But did you know that there was one instance of Harry nearly getting expelled, which the movies brushed under the rug? But that's not the craziest part. You see, unlike his other times of using magic underage, which is strictly prohibited by the Ministry of Magic, this time Harry didn't lift a magical finger, but was framed. Yep, in only the second book, Harry nearly gets the boot from Hogwarts, as well as an official letter from the Ministry, because of none other than your favorite house elf, Dobby. Dobby is one of the most integral characters in the Harry Potter series, beloved by millions. But if you've only seen the movie, or if it's been a bit since you've read the books, these first two chapters in the Chamber of Secrets might have slipped your mind. So today, I'm going to unpack every little detail and difference between the book and movie in regard to Harry's 12th birthday at the Dursleys and Dobby's first appearance, which nearly cost Harry his ticket back into the wizarding world. My name is Gibby, and welcome back to episode 17 of Movies vs. Manuscripts, Harry Potter Edition. This is the show where I analyze your favorite wizarding franchise and compare the movies to the books to find every single difference. Today, we are officially kicking off season 2 of this series, which revolves around the Chamber of Secrets. I'm so excited to get into this book and movie, and today we have a killer episode as we discuss the Dursleys, who might be some of my favorite people in the books. Not because I like them, but because there's so much more to them in the books than what we get in the movies. So episodes like this, when we discuss Harry's birthday and Dobby's visit, all at the Dursleys' home, give me a chance to dive into Harry's life beyond the castle. Before we go any further, however, I wanted to shout out this commenter from a previous episode. Each week, I highlight one of my favorite comments, so be sure to share your thoughts down below when you're done watching. Plus, subscribe if you want to stay tuned for future episodes of this series. Per usual, I'll cover all the differences across the 4 major categories of characters, timeline, location, and plot. But first, let's refresh our memory on what happened in these scenes of the movie. Kicking off with the opening title screen, we see a shot of a village that pans down to the Dursleys' home and Harry's bedroom window. We see Harry looking at the photo album that Hagrid gave him at the end of the previous movie and hear Hedwig screeching in her cage. Harry tries to tell her to be quiet, but it's already too late as Vernon calls for Harry to come down to the living room. He tells Harry to keep his bird quiet, and then the Dursleys review the schedule for the night as Vernon is about to have one of the biggest meetings of his life. After Petunia and Dudley share their parts to play, they all look at Harry, who says that he'll be keeping quiet in his room and pretending that he doesn't exist. Then, as Vernon's guests arrive, Harry goes upstairs to his room, but is shocked to see a creature jumping on his bed. The creature sees Harry and says that it's an honor to meet him, but Harry quickly gets to the point and asks, "Who are you?" The creature then introduces himself as Dobby the house elf, and Harry tells him that this isn't a great time for a house elf to visit. But Dobby continues and tells him that he had to come visit, but he's having trouble saying why. Harry tells him to have a seat, but Dobby breaks down at this, as no wizard has ever shown him such kindness before. Then, after nearly speaking ill of his family, Dobby punishes himself by slamming his head on Harry's dresser. After Harry calms him down, Dobby tells him that he came to warn him about returning to Hogwarts. He says Harry must not go back this year, telling him that most terrible things are about to happen. Harry, obviously shocked by this, asks Dobby who is planning such things. But Dobby begins beating himself with Harry's lamp, as he obviously is bound to not speak of such things. The noise from Dobby's punishment reaches downstairs and causes Vernon to run up and check on Harry, who quickly throws Dobby into his closet. Vernon tells Harry that if he makes one more sound, he'll wish he had never been born, and then he goes back downstairs. Harry then takes Dobby out of the closet and tells him that's why he must go back to Hogwarts. Then, after Dobby reveals that he's been keeping Harry's letters, Harry gets more upset and chases Dobby downstairs. Dobby then threatens Harry by telling him to promise he won't go back to Hogwarts, or else Dobby will drop Aunt Petunia's massive pudding dessert. Harry says that he can't make that promise, and then tries to catch the pudding before it falls, but it's too late, and sadly, he made it look even worse for himself. Vernon then tries to recover, telling the guests that his nephew is disturbed, and Harry sees Dobby vanish into thin air. We then cut to seeing Vernon put bars and locks on Harry's room, and that is where we'll end off for this week. Next week, we'll get into Ron's rescue of Harry and his time at the Weasleys. But this week, we've already got our hands full. To start, let's unpack our first 3 categories of characters, timeline, and location. For characters, we have just a couple differences. First, I know I mentioned this in the Philosopher's Stone series, but I feel like I need to bring it up again since it's been a while. But Petunia and Dudley are blondes. I'm still not sure why this was changed for the film, and my only theory is that perhaps they couldn't find good actors that fit the right description. Second, we're missing one character, Mathilda Hopkirk, who actually gets brought up a number of times later in this series, but we'll get to the details of her involvement in the plot changes. Next, as for timeline, there's just a couple shifts. Of course, per usual, they condense the events of multiple days into essentially one night. Plus, Harry's birthday happens the day of Vernon's big dinner party. However, in the movie, they show Ron saying happy birthday to Harry the night that they rescue him, which would have been a couple days later. Maybe Ron was saying happy belated birthday, but it being Harry's birthday actually on the day of the first scene makes a big difference, as one of the main reasons Harry is in such a bad mood is because no one has written him even on his birthday. Lastly, for location, there are no changes, so hooray. Anyway, before we get to the plot changes, I just want to remind you that I can't cover every line spoken from the book and movie, as that would take forever. So if you're looking to relive these moments for yourself, be sure to claim your free trial of Audible using my link in the description. Alright, let's jump into the plot. Just like we've done for all our episodes, I want to start off with a brief rundown of the catching up we get from Harry in the first chapter. Today, we're covering the first 2 chapters in the book, but this first chapter specifically gives the reader a brief summary of the entire story. Like most good authors, J.K. Rowling refreshes us on several characters, bits of context, and lore to help get us back up to speed on the story we're reading. In a movie format, this is unnecessary as this film medium doesn't require such detailed summary to start the movie. Abstract ideas like Harry missing Hogwarts is shown through the actor's emotional portrayal of the character, so I'm not going to go over all of that, but something that I did want to mention was a small detail that Rowling adds to this summary, and this something is Harry's broomstick. It's a small point, but I found it quite interesting that in the book, Quidditch once again is a focal point of the plot, right from the beginning. After listing off everything Harry is missing from Hogwarts, including Hagrid, his friends, the secret tunnels of the castle, and more, he ends it off with saying that he misses his Nimbus 2000, which Vernon locked up the moment Harry got home. He mentions that he's afraid he might not make it back on the Gryffindor House Quidditch team due to the lack of practice. I found this quite funny, as even if Vernon hadn't have locked up his broomstick, would Harry have even been able to practice outside around Muggles? Regardless, I like this bit of extra detail that we don't get in the movie. And not only is his broomstick locked up, but everything magical is put away, as the Dursleys have banned anything remotely related to magic. And that brings us to the first omission of the movie, which is Harry's breakfast with the Dursleys. Per usual, the Dursleys get seriously cut short in each movie, and the Chamber of Secrets is no exception. Our first significant change this week is a brief breakfast interaction that starts off the book. You see, before Rowling goes into Harry's inner dialogue about missing school and his friends, she writes about Harry having breakfast with the Dursleys. Vernon and Petunia are trying to fatten up Dudley, and Dudley asks Harry to pass the frying pan which has the bacon. Harry then replies with, "What's the magic word?" And this causes all 3 Dursleys to jump out of their chairs, with Vernon turning purple in the face from anger. Both parents then shout at Harry about using the M word, and Harry profusely apologizes, telling them that he only meant for Dudley to say please. This is a brief interaction, but it perfectly segues into the story and is a funny moment with the Dursleys, which you know I won't ever pass up on the opportunity to see. Next, we have another condensed Dursley moment, in which we have an extended description of the night's plans. That morning at breakfast, after the M word incident, Vernon has them go over the schedule for the night, very similarly to what we see in the movie. The only difference is that in the book, they go through the whole night, beyond just the initial plans that they show in the movie. I won't go through every line, but a funny one is that Dudley plans on telling their guests, "We had to write an essay about our hero at school, Mr. Mason, and I wrote about you." After this line sucking up to the important guests, Petunia bursts into tears about how her little Dudleykins was growing up. Now, before I get into describing the rest of Harry's day before the dinner party, which was of course omitted from the film, I wanted to mention one small bit of context. At the very opening of the movie, we see Harry looking at pictures from Hagrid's scrapbook, which, by the way, I don't think Vernon would have let him have, given that in the book we learn they locked up everything related to magic. But anyway, Harry turns to an upset Hedwig and tells her that he sadly can't let her out. This is true, as in the book we learn that Vernon had padlocked her cage shut, and just like we see in the movie, Vernon complains about Hedwig making noise, except this happens at breakfast. But anyway, that's not my point. My point is that in the movie, Harry says, "Besides, I'm not allowed to do magic outside of school." Maybe this is only me and I'm just stupid, but I was always curious why he said this. Why is it magical to let your bird out to fly? But in the book, Rowling makes a point to write that Harry debated using magic to unlock the padlock on Hedwig's cage to let her out. In the movie, because it's a fleeting moment, you really don't even notice the padlock. At least, I never did. I am sure some people caught this, but if anyone watched the movie without reading the book, they might have been confused by this line. Anyway, now I want to cover the rest of Harry's day after breakfast and before the dinner party. It takes up a couple of pages in the book, but obviously it's removed from the movie for time. Before I go into this, I actually want to clarify that this opening scene in the movie is completely okay in my opinion. I think it properly condenses these chapters, and I really can't complain about this part of the adaptation. Of course, like I said, I'd love to see more of the Dursleys, but I understand they can't spend 15 minutes at the Dursleys' house. If you're like me and you nerd out about this stuff, then you'll enjoy this extra bit of context, which may or may not include a cameo from Dobby. So, picking up from breakfast time, Vernon tells Harry to stay out of Petunia's way as she cleans. Vernon tells him that he's going into town to pick up suits for him and Dudley, and Harry then heads outside as he sings happy birthday to himself and recounts what a sad day it is. His friends haven't been writing, he misses Hogwarts like crazy, and he has been having nightmares about Voldemort. As he lays on the garden bench thinking about this horrible day, he suddenly sees big green eyes staring at him from the bushes, and bolts upright. Of course, we know now that these big eyes are Dobby's, but we won't meet Dobby for a little while longer. First, Dudley needs to do some taunting. Dudley walks up to Harry and tells him that he knows what day it is, taunting him that no one cares it's his birthday. He then asks Harry why he's staring at the bush, and Harry tells him that he's trying to figure out which spell to use to set it on fire. This freaks Dudley out, and Harry starts speaking in gibberish to scare him off. Harry then paid dearly for this bit of fun as Petunia put him to work the rest of the day cleaning the house. The day went on, and then finally as dinner time arrived, Harry was quickly fed a pitiful meal and then told to go upstairs and act like he didn't exist. But after entering his bedroom, as we know from the movie, he found a big surprise. And that brings us to our next set of changes, all of which revolve around Dobby. First, we learn from Dobby that his family makes him do a lot of punishments, like what we see in the movie, and that sometimes they even remind him to do extra punishments. Obviously, Dobby comes from a very abusive wizarding family. After Harry asks why he doesn't just leave his family, Dobby tells him that house elves are bound to serve one family until they die. Harry then remarks that he thought he had it bad here at the Dursleys, and then asks Dobby if there's anything he can do to help. It is then at this moment that Dobby starts wailing and saying how he heard of Harry's greatness, but never his goodness. Next, after a bit of dialogue very similar to what we get in the movie, we have one more key bit of information left out, which is that Dobby says he's known about this plot for months, and that even Dumbledore doesn't know of this evil. He says decent wizards don't know of this type of magic. Now, I'm not sure how fleshed out J.K. Rowling had made her entire story at this point, but that sounds an awful lot like foreshadowing for a Horcrux. As we learn later on in the series, Dumbledore took a while to figure out that this was what Tom Riddle was using to cement his power as Voldemort. I find it very interesting that we get foreshadowing of this in just the second chapter of only book 2 in the series, as Dobby tells Harry outright that this evil type of magic is beyond even Dumbledore. Of course, this is left out of the movie as it's a little too much foreshadowing at this point in the story. After Dobby lets this information slip, that's when he gets up and starts beating himself with the lamp. Another small difference is that in the movie, the Dursleys blame a cat for the noise, but in the book, Vernon blames Dudley for leaving the TV on. Then, just like in the movie, he rushes upstairs and confronts Harry, who shoves Dobby in a closet. Next, Harry actually asks Dobby if he took the letters, unlike the movie in which Dobby freely reveals that he took them. Then, once they head downstairs, Dobby crouches on top of a cupboard out of Harry's reach, whereas the movie shows him just on the ground a few feet in front of Harry. Plus, an even bigger change is that Dobby simply makes the pudding fall to the floor, not on top of Mrs. Mason. It made a massive mess still, but obviously for dramatic purposes, they show Harry trying to get the pudding, which makes it look like he's doing the magic himself. Plus, they show it going on the Dursleys' guests, not the floor. Now, before I get to the biggest detail they left out, which is the letter Harry receives, there's one last small detail that the movie changes. In the movie, they show Dobby vanishing quietly and like pixie dust in the wind. In the book, however, J.K. Rowling had a clear idea of what apparition was. She clearly writes that Dobby vanished with a loud crack like a whip, which as we know is what true apparition is like in the books and in the later movies. I think they made it quiet for the movie just to further condemn Harry as the supposed culprit for the pudding fiasco. If there was a loud crack in the movie, that would have been way more noticeable for the Muggles. Okay, so now we have the final and perhaps the most important moment from this chapter, which was completely left out of the movie, and that is Harry receiving a letter from the Ministry of Magic. After the loud crash of the pudding and the crack of Dobby apparating, Vernon and Petunia burst into the kitchen to see what is happening. A small detail to point out is that unlike the movie, the house layout must have had a closed-off kitchen that wasn't visible from the dining room. Still though, Vernon explains, just like in the movie, that his nephew is disturbed, but they continue on with their dinner party, as Petunia simply grabs some ice cream for dessert. They hand Harry a mop to clean up, and Vernon promises to flay Harry within an inch of his life once the Masons leave. But what happens next is the massive change. You see, pudding doesn't land on Mrs. Mason's head, but something else does. a letter from the Ministry of Magic. As Harry is cleaning up, an owl swooped into the house and dropped a letter onto Mrs. Mason, who then runs from the home shouting that they're all lunatics. Mr. Mason then angrily informed the Dursleys that his wife is deathly afraid of birds, and asked if this was some kind of joke. After both the Masons had stormed out, Vernon came into Harry and demanded that he open the letter. The letter, which was from Mafalda Hopkirk at the Ministry of Magic, explained that they detected a hover charm being used at Harry's residence, and that any further spell work would result in his expulsion from Hogwarts. Plus, she reminded Harry that underage magic is illegal. If Harry thought he had it bad, he had it much worse now, as the Dursleys finally knew that Harry wasn't allowed to do magic outside of school. At this, Vernon began to lock up Harry's room, telling him that he would never go back to school ever again. He even fitted a cat flap to Harry's door so that they could give him food 3 times a day. As mentioned in the timeline changes, Harry suffered through this for 3 days before being rescued, but thankfully Ron and the twins did eventually come to save the day. But that's a story for next week. As for this week, that change wraps things up for me in this episode. But now it's time to hear from you. What do you think about the small and large changes for these scenes? Like me, do you wish we could have seen more of the Dursleys in the movie? Let me know in the comments below. As always, be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and check out the series playlist to catch up on any episodes you might have missed so far. Have a great week, and I'll see you in the next episode.